She didn't want to make a scene, nor demand anything. "I just wanted a chair at the table." "Are you coming, Mom?" That never came. A hug before supper. But what she received was silence. The kind of silence that hurts more than any word crossed. A message from her daughter-in-law, too polite to seem cruel, but cutting enough to hurt inside. "This year, we prefer something more intimate. I hope you understand." Understand? She understood. She understood perfectly what it was like to be forgotten by those who generated with so much love. Christmas, for her, has always been about presents. About preparing everything with your own hands, about decorating every corner with intention, about gathering even the mismatches. But that year, it was different. She was not called. She was not remembered. And yet, was not angry, but with something that no one expected. Hope. But what she carried in her arms, next to a man unknown to her family, would change everything. Because this man, he was not just a companion. He was the lost past of someone in that house. Sometimes, life is silent just to hear the sound of a second chance coming. Sometimes, the pain of an ignored mother-in-law is just the first thread of a story that still needs to be told and felt. And what no one expected was that dinner would change the course of an entire family. That a simple gold star would bring back what years of pride had buried. And that in the end, forgiveness would sit at the table, without warning, but with a reserved place. Get ready. This is not just a Christmas story. It's a powerful reminder that love doesn't go away. It only hides in the words we fail to say. Until someone, with courage and tenderness, decides to break the silence. In the dim light of a cold December morning, where time seemed to walk in socks in the silent corridors of the house, she descended the stairs with steps that betrayed more than age. They betrayed absence. In the living room, the smell of artificial pine and furniture wax tried to fill a void that time shamelessly opened. She walked to the fireplace furniture and pulled out an old box, made of faded cardboard, where she kept memories of other Christmases. Between worn ribbons, chipped ornaments, and a little angel without a wing, rested letters, letters that once warmed his heart. But there was one in particular. She held it reverently, as if that piece of paper had a soul. The envelope was yellowed, the handwritten name trembled with contained emotion. It was 3 years ago, the last time she had written to her family, asking for a supper together. He never got a response. She sat down in the brown leather armchair, the same one her husband wore before he left, and stared at the unlit fireplace. The flame that didn't burn there was also missing inside her. He ran his fingers over the words of the letter, as if caressing a memory. "Dear son, dear daughter-in-law, this year I would love to spend Christmas with you." The choked voice could not finish reading. A lump in the throat, one of those that hurt more than screaming. The camera, if it were a film, would show a close-up in his eyes. There were no tears, but an entire ocean held there. It was the kind of pain that needed no scandal. It was absence with a surname. Family. She wondered when, exactly, she had become a stranger in her own blood. He remembered the old Christmases, when the table was noisy, the turkey dried, and the wine too sweet. She remembered running around the kitchen, laughing with her husband, children opening presents early. Now, the only thing that could be heard was the ticking of the clock on the wall. The same one that, mercilessly, marked every second of oblivion. The images came as flashbacks to a time when she felt alive and desired. Today, the letter in his hands was all that remained, and it had not even been read. In an attempt not to collapse, he got up and opened the curtain of the room. Outside, the snow fell thinly, discreetly, as if asking permission to touch the ground. The streets were deserted, the windows lit up in red and gold. Each house seemed to live its own Christmas story, except for hers. It was as if Christmas skipped that address on purpose, as if it knew that inside lived a weight that tired of waiting. With the envelope still between her fingers, she looked up at the sky and murmured, "If only someone would listen to me." But heaven was too busy doling out miracles to other zip codes. It was at that moment, between discouragement and silence, that his eyes stopped on a smaller box at the bottom of the shelf. Inside, there were more letters. Some she wrote to herself, others she never got to deliver. But they all spoke of hope. It was an old habit, one of those that we forget still exists. Letters as prayers, like mute screams, like promises that there is still something good to happen. And as he read fragments of himself in past words, a thought whispered in his mind, maybe it's not too late. This phrase ignited a wisp of heat in her, something between nostalgia and courage. A spark. She held on tight to that unanswered letter and, as if talking to her own past, said in a low voice, "If this is my last Christmas alone, that at least I live it in its entirety." It wasn't drama. It was a decision. The kind of choice that comes from deep in the soul, where the woman she used to be lives. The woman who welcomed, who smiled even tiredly, who sewed ties instead of cutting ties. That woman still existed. She just kept quiet for a while. But I was ready to write a new chapter. Not with words, but with attitude. That's when the doorbell rang. A dry, unexpected sound, almost out of place in that muted environment. She stood up with her heart racing, the envelope still in her hands. When he opened the door, there was no one. Just an icy breeze and an envelope on the floor. No sender, no recipient, but with a family stamp. She picked it up, looked around and closed the door slowly, as if trying not to scare fate. As he sat down again, he opened the paper with trembling fingers. It was just a blank sheet, but there was something there. An aroma, an old, familiar smell, from a time when everything still made sense. She leaned the envelope to her chest and closed her eyes. I didn't know why, but I felt that that blank sheet was a sign. A start, a calling. Something inside her said, "Get ready. You're not going to spend this Christmas alone." It was not an illusion. It was faith. Those that don't need proof. One of those that are born when the heart decides not to close, even after being forgotten so much. And it was with this new feeling, half shy, half urgent, that she raised her eyes and saw through the window. A figure in the distance, sitting on a snow-covered bench. A man. A stranger. Or perhaps, an answer. On that cold Saturday morning, the sound of the alarm clock was not even necessary. She was already awake long before the sun peeked through the cracks in the curtain. Sitting on the edge of the bed, with her hands resting on her lap and her eyes lost somewhere between her wardrobe and her memories, she took a deep breath as if preparing for another day without answers. The hands turned slowly on the clock on the wall, and every second seemed to mock the time that passed without anything changing. The house was quiet, but it was not a quiet silence. It was a heavy, thick silence, like the muffled sound of the heart when it needs to contain itself. There was a Christmas tree already set up in the living room, made by herself, of course, decorated with red and gold balls, all kept from past Christmases, like little sentimental treasures. But there were no presents, nor voices, nor plans. In the kitchen, she prepared coffee as she did every morning. But that day, the gestures had another intention. She wanted to occupy her mind. Every spoonful of sugar, every cup washed, was an effort not to look at the phone. Because she already knew. The phone wouldn't ring. Even so, she left him face up, on the living room table, like a child waiting for a miracle that does not come. The ritual was repeated every year. Hope and frustration sitting side by side in the armchair, sipping hot tea and biting into souvenir cookies. She walked through the rooms as if revisiting ruins of an ancient joy. He stopped in front of the photos on the shelf. Her son was still small, Her husband smiled, the dog that was no longer with them. Everyone there, except for her, because there was only the reflection of the forgotten woman who stayed behind while everyone else moved on. The most difficult thing to accept was not the absence of an invitation. It was the fact that no one else seemed to miss it. She clearly remembered when her son met his future wife. In the beginning, there was enchantment. The daughter-in-law seemed kind, sweet, respectful. But little by little, subtly, restrictions emerged. First, it was this year we're going to spend Christmas just the two of us. Then, we prefer to do something more intimate. Until one day, the phrase came along that burns to this day like a splinter in the chest. Maybe it's better for you not to come, to avoid embarrassment. The justification was always polite, masked with good intentions. But the truth was cruder. She was being disconnected from her own story, like a character who loses his speech and disappears from the script. He tried to call that day. I knew I shouldn't, but my heart was stubborn. He dialed his son's number. He called once, twice, 3 times, until it fell into voicemail. He waited an hour, then tried again. And this time, someone answered. The voice of the daughter-in-law, dry, bluntly. Hi. So, we're in a hurry here, you know? In fact, this year's dinner will be just for a few friends, okay? I hope you understand. Merry Christmas. And the phone hung up. No time for replicas. No room for tears. She stood there, sitting on the couch, with the device still in her ear, as if the silence that remained was able to return what the words took. It was as if she had been expelled without anyone opening the door. As if his name were synonymous with discomfort. And it hurt more than she would like to admit. But there was something curious about that silence. It seemed to have a life of its own. It was as if each object in the house watched in respect. The walls, witnesses of so many noisy Christmases, now welcomed the emptiness with a sad delicacy. The lights of the tree flickered by themselves, creating an almost cruel contrast to the loneliness around them. She sat down across from them, hugged a cushion, and closed her eyes. Not to sleep, but to try to remember what it was like when everything still had meaning. He remembered the smell of the food, the mixed voices, the good mess. And he wondered, in an internal whisper, if at some point she was no longer needed, or if they were simply tired of waiting for her to leave on her own. The curious thing is that, even with her injured chest, she still managed to wish well. There was no anger. There was hurt, yes. But there was also nostalgia for what could have been. There were questions that would never be asked, and answers that would never come. She didn't want confrontation. He wanted presence. She wanted to be remembered not out of obligation, but out of affection. And that, perhaps, would be too much to ask in a world that is always running away from its roots. As he reflected, the radio, forgotten in the corner of the kitchen, began to play an old song. Those that warm the soul and open the floodgate of emotions. She smiled, sad but grateful, because, even alone, there was something inside her that still lit up when Christmas approached. It was at that moment that she made a silent decision. I wouldn't tell anyone. I wouldn't warn you. But I wouldn't let that Christmas go by like the others. If no one called her, then she would call herself. To live, to remember who he was, and to honor the woman who built so much for that family. There was a dormant force in his heart, a spark of dignity and self-love that was beginning to rise again. Not out of pride, but out of necessity. Because the abandonment of others could not mean the abandonment of oneself. It was time to change the script. And for some reason she didn't understand, her eyes turned back to the window, to the outside, to the same figure sitting on the snow-covered bench. The stranger was still there. He didn't move. He just looked ahead, as if he also expected something. Or someone. And in that still gaze, there was a restlessness that touched deeply. She felt a shiver, not of fear, but of foreboding. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe not. But something about that figure seemed to have come from the past. Or the future. And at that moment, as in a whisper of fate, she knew it was not the end. It was the beginning of something. Something still, unnamed, but full of meaning. And it was with this thought that she got up, grabbed her coat, and decided to leave. Because, sometimes, it is in the silence of the house that the first cry for change is born. The wind cut his face with icy delicacy, as if asking permission to touch the skin already scarred by so many winters. She tightened her scarf around her neck, her steps firm but with no definite direction. He just walked. There was something therapeutic about that gesture. Leaving the house was more than physical movement, an attempt to move internally. The streets were calm, with trees covered in snow and streetlights lit even before dusk. People passed quickly, carrying bags. Children, hurry. And she, alone, walked in silence, but with a slight weight less on her chest. Because, even though the pain was there was something different that afternoon. As if fate took a deep breath before starting to speak. She decided to cut her way through the square, a place she used to visit when the world still seemed more welcoming. There was a wooden bench under a bare oak tree, covered in a thin layer of snow. Sitting there, a man. Gray hair, shabby coat, distant look. He didn't seem to notice her presence right away, but when she passed him, he heard her name. Low, firm, as if it were a memory speaking. She stopped. He turned slowly. His eyes stared at her with genuine surprise, but also with tenderness. "Is that really you?" he asked. Her memory searched the dustiest drawers of the past until she found that face. It wasn't strange. It was old. He smiled, as if time had just paused and now he was back on track. "We met a long time ago." She nodded, still confused. She sat on the other side of the bench, a little embarrassed, but curious. And soon, the words began to come as if they had been kept for decades. He said he remembered her from a distant Christmas, when she had organized a dinner for people forgotten by the family. He was one of them. She laughed, surprised that someone still keeps something so old. "You gave me a meal and a blanket." "But it was his look that gave me dignity," he said, his eyes moist. And there, on that bench, lives connected again, not by chance, but by necessity. The conversation took an unexpectedly intimate turn. They talked about children, losses, letters that no one answered. She revealed that she felt forgotten by her own family. He confessed that he was looking for his daughter, whom he had not seen for more than 20 years. A daughter who, according to him, was removed by a series of mistakes, silences, and poorly explained decisions. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to try," he said, taking a crumpled envelope from the inside pocket of his coat. "I wrote this months ago, but I never had the courage to send it." The envelope, made of cream paper, was similar to the one she had found at home. And for a moment, the world seemed to play with the details, as if it were sewing coincidences with invisible thread. She held the envelope carefully, without opening it. There was something sacred about that paper. "Cards have power," she said, "even when they are not read." Their eyes met, and for seconds, it was no longer winter. There was warmth in that exchange. There was understanding. It was as if their solitudes fit together, like pieces of the same old puzzle. She felt like asking more, about her daughter, about her mistakes, about what had brought him to that square, but she respected his time. And he, in return, respected hers. But something in his eyes said that this would not be the last time they would meet. Before they got up, he took another item from his pocket, a small golden box. Inside, a metal star, one of those that hang from Christmas trees. I kept it for 20 years. It was my daughter's. I always dreamed of returning it personally." She was speechless. He took the star with reverence, feeling a weight in it that was not material. "Maybe you're closer to finding her again than you think," she said, not knowing where that intuition came from. He smiled with his eyes, as if recognizing a premonition, and the two stood up together, walking side by side to the exit of the square. The cold continued, but it didn't hurt so much. Before they said goodbye, he looked at her with a soft, almost childlike expression. "You know, you're the only person who has spoken to me today." She smiled. "And maybe you're the only one who really listened to me." They promised to meet again, not with words, but with gestures. And as she walked home with the star in her pocket, she felt that this meeting was more than a coincidence. It was a message, a sign. And although he could not explain it, there was an invisible thread that united this man to his story, and perhaps to the story of the woman who had excluded her from Christmas. But this, she would only discover it by following the impulse that now sprouted in her chest, not to let Christmas go unnoticed. And it was with this thought, between snow, memories, and silent looks, that she knew the next step would not be taken alone. That same night, as the snow thickened outside like a blanket heavy over the city, she was sitting at the kitchen table with the gold star on the white tablecloth. The object seemed to radiate a subtle glow, not coming from the ceiling light, but from some memory that still pulsated within it. It was curious how a simple ornament could carry so much weight. Her fingers ran along the contours of the piece like someone reading a book in Braille, trying to decipher a story that she did not yet know, but that somehow already touched her. He was more than a star. It was a link, a point of connection between two worlds, hers of silent exclusion, and that of the man who, even shrouded in mystery, seemed to hold a key to something greater. She prepared 2 coffees, one for herself and one for him, as if that gesture were a tacit contract that their stories would remain intertwined. As he stirred the sugar slowly, she said little. But the little he said with his eyes. She said that every year she set up the tree even without visitors, that she made food for 2 knowing that only she would eat, and that she still did not fail to put a lit candle in the window. Because someone will come back, right? He nodded with a smile that was not quite cheerful, but was understanding. Christmas has this cruel gift, to remember those who are not. Agreed. But at that moment, something inside her said that it didn't have to be like this anymore. It was he who, with an almost holy calm, touched the star and said, "If Christmas is about light, maybe it's time to light ours." That phrase kept echoing, not as a suggestion, but as a calling, an invitation to courage. That's when she got up and walked to the old wooden cabinet in the hallway. From there, he took out a small box, where he kept old cards, faded photographs, and a napkin with his son's handwriting written in pencil. It was like a reliquary from times when she was still apart. But there was, at the bottom of the box, something that she herself had forgotten, a wrapped gift with a worn bow that was never delivered. He had been there for 3 years. He had his daughter-in-law's name written on the label. She held it carefully, as if it were too fragile for the present, but strong enough to carry the past. "I was going to deliver it for Christmas when she asked me not to go," she explained, almost embarrassed. "I thought I would forgive faster." But the present remained. He didn't say anything. He just looked at him tenderly, as if he understood every layer of that wound. And it was at that moment that something lit up in her. Maybe it was the courage, maybe it was just exhaustion from waiting. But she stood up and said, "I'm going. This year, I'm going." His eyes lit up. "Are you sure?" She replied firmly, "I have faith." And that was what sealed the silent pact between them. They spent the rest of the night assembling a small basket. They took the old gift, the gold star, and a scented candle she had saved for a special day. He suggested including a letter, not to demand explanations, but to offer what almost no one has the courage to give: understanding. She wrote in trembling but decisive handwriting, "Dear family, maybe I wasn't the ideal mother-in-law, and maybe you weren't the kindest daughter-in-law. But between us, there is someone I love more than anything: my son. And for his sake, I come in peace. Because it's Christmas. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life sitting by the window waiting for a phone call." It was a short but powerful letter, and when she finished writing, she folded it and put it next to the gift. The man, visibly moved, excused himself to go to the window. He looked up at the sky and whispered something she didn't hear. When he returned, he only said, "I think it's time." She agreed, and they began to prepare. They did not know whether they would be received with open arms or closed doors. But at that moment, it didn't matter. The important thing was to go. It was to show that the light inside them still shone, even if extinguished by distance and time. Before leaving, she put on a coat she hadn't worn in years. The one that her husband loved, and who said he left her with the face of a strong woman. She tied her hair with a gold clip and put on a soft lipstick. In the mirror in the hallway, she saw a version of herself that she had not found for a long time. Firm, serene, and willing to face anything. The man was waiting for her at the door, with the gift in his hands. They exchanged a look that said it all: "We are not alone." And they left, the two of them, walking side by side on the icy sidewalk. The basket between them, as a symbol of surrender, not just of objects, but of themselves. At every step, the city seemed to fall silent. The lights of the houses flickered, the children laughed in the distance, but in their path there was only the sound of snow being trampled and the heart beating in the rhythm of hope. When they turned the last corner and saw her son's house lit up in the distance, she took a deep breath. It was like arriving at the center of an emotional labyrinth, where everything could go wrong, or everything could finally find its place. And it was with this feeling, between tension and faith, that she stopped in front of the gate. He looked at her and said in a whisper, "You are not alone. Not this time." And together, they pressed the bell. The street was calm, almost in reverence. Each Christmas light flashed slowly, as if it also awaited the scene that was about to take place. She stopped before the gate of her son's house, her heart beating so strongly that it seemed to echo in her ears. In front of him, the windows glowed in warm tones. I could hear laughter in the background, the sound of plates being placed on the table, the soft and distant Christmas track. Everything that has always belonged to her, but which, in recent years, he could only hear from a distance. The man next to her kept his expression serene, but there was something in his eyes that revealed anticipation, or perhaps fear. She pressed the gift to her chest, took a deep breath, and with trembling fingers, pressed the doorbell. The sound reverberated inside the house, and then, silence. One of those silences that is not empty, but full of meanings. The sound of the music stopped for a moment. Someone asked, "Who will it be?" in a muffled voice. Footsteps approached, and then the door opened. It was her, the daughter-in-law. His eyes wide, his body frozen for a second that seemed to last an eternity. He said nothing. She only looked, first at her mother-in-law, then at the man who accompanied her. Her face turned pale, as if she had seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to disguise her shock with a rigid posture. But it was too late. The surprise had already taken over. The protagonist did not respond immediately. He held out the gift gently, his eyes calm but firm. "I brought something to you. I just wanted to leave it at the door." But he insisted on accompanying me. She turned slightly to the man next to her. It was at that moment that his daughter-in-law looked at him more closely. His eyes narrowed, his chin trembled. She took a step back, as if the world around her had slipped under her feet. "Father!" The word came out in a whisper, more pain than sound. The man removed the cap from his head with his slow hands and said, I didn't want to scare you. I just wanted, see you again." What followed was a silence so heavy that not even the cold could get through. The son, hearing the commotion, appeared in the hallway. His eyes passed from his mother to the man, then to his wife. "What's going on?" Her mother-in-law replied in a quiet voice, "I think we all have something to talk about." But no one moved. The daughter-in-law, in shock, recoiled as she tried to understand what her eyes saw. The man took a step forward, but stopped. "I didn't come to demand anything. I came to ask for forgiveness, and thank this woman for giving me the chance to say that by looking into her eyes." The daughter-in-law put her hands to her mouth. Tears began to fall. There was no longer any way to hide. The past had walked through the door, and it brought with it decades of absence, heartache, and unanswered questions. The protagonist felt her whole body tremble, but not out of fear. It was as if an invisible force supported his legs at that moment. The son, astonished, took 2 steps towards his mother, but said nothing. It was as if he finally saw in her something he had forgotten: humanity. She wasn't just the difficult mother-in-law. She was a woman with pain, with stories, with depth. And she was there, in front of them, not to collect, but to heal. The whole scene had an almost sacred aura, as if a time out of time was happening there. The neighborhood seemed frozen. And inside that house, where before there was only a party, now there was truth. Raw, painful, liberating. "Didn't you know who he was?" the son asked his mother, his voice almost a whisper. She shook her head. "I only knew his story after we met. Before that, he was just someone alone at Christmas, like me." The phrase hung in the air like a soft arrow, painful but necessary. The daughter-in-law collapsed on the living room floor. He sat and cried like a child who finds a piece of the past that he never knew he needed. The man knelt before her, placed the gold star on the carpet, and said, "I kept this to give you back, for 20 years." She held the object with trembling hands, as if there was everything that had never been said. Tears fell on the star, like belated blessings. And then, as if something invisible released the air, the son spoke. "Let's go in." It was a simple sentence, but loaded with everything. Forgiveness, acceptance, understanding. The protagonist still hesitated. "I didn't want to invade." But he stretched out his hand, and she took it. For the first time in a long time, she felt pulled in, not from home, but from family. The heat of the room contrasted with the cold outside. The smell of food now had another meaning. It was more than supper. It was redemption. It was a reunion. The guests present did not understand everything immediately, but they knew from the atmosphere that something great had just happened. And as she crossed the door, the old gift in her hands, she saw that what was being delivered there was not just a package. It was the symbol of a new chance. The star, now resting on the table, seemed to shine brighter. And without anyone noticing, a candle in the window was lit. Not for her, but for her daughter-in-law, as if in an unconscious gesture of gratitude. A cycle was beginning to close. But before forgiveness, there would still be tears. There would still be harsh words to come. And the past would still have more things to say. In that room, with the soft lights reflecting off the glasses still half full and the smell of warm food hanging in the air, something different was happening. It was not just a family reunion, nor a meeting marked by nostalgia. It was something more raw, more true. The feeling was that everyone there was in front of a mirror where, for the first time, they saw their own pain stamped on the other's face. The daughter-in-law, sitting on the floor with the gold star in her hands, still seemed to be immersed in an internal whirlwind. Her father, standing before her, dared not break the space that had been created, that invisible space between the two, which can only be crossed with honesty. The mother-in-law watched everything in silence, but her presence was like a thread of energy, discreet but essential. The son, standing behind his wife, caressed her shoulders with his left hand, trying to process himself that the man in front of him was his father-in-law, and even more, to understand his mother's role in that twist that no Christmas script would dare to predict. "Do you remember the last time you saw me?" The daughter-in-law's question came between sobs, but with a strength that only those who carry years of silence can produce. The man nodded, his eyes red. "I remember your pink backpack, the way you hugged me at the gate and asked me not to delay." His voice broke at the end. "I didn't want to, but I left." And the phrase was hovering, like a weight that no one wanted to touch, but everyone felt. The mother-in-law closed her eyes for a moment. Not out of pain, but out of respect. It wasn't just about father and daughter. It was about the kind of pain that shapes personalities, that silences affections, and that builds walls so high that not even love dares to climb. The open wound there was not visible, but it was deep as time. And it had layers. "I grew up angry," the daughter-in-law said. "Angry at my mom for not talking about you. Angry at me for wanting to know. Angry at you for not coming back." The words came out like thorns, but there was something therapeutic about them. As if, finally, she had the right to say what she swallowed for years. His father did not interrupt. I just let her speak, absorbing each sentence as if accepting a sentence. The protagonist felt, in silence, that she was witnessing something sacred. She knew what it was like to swallow words. He knew what it was like to wait for someone who didn't come back. And, more than that, he knew what it was like to need forgiveness from someone who was never at fault, but suffered the consequences. That's why I was there. Not to mediate, but to support with the whole heart. The son, until then silent, sat next to his wife and hugged her. "You never talked about it with me." She replied with a pained half-smile. "Not even with me." And then he turned to his father. "I needed to understand if you were or if you were taken. And today I understand. I understand how much I wanted to blame you because it was easier than accepting that no one came for me." He knelt in front of her. He took his daughter's hands carefully, as if they were relics. "I came now, late, flawed, but whole." That sentence had an almost spiritual weight. It wasn't perfect, but it was human. And at that moment, tears flowed not only from her daughter's eyes, but also from her mother-in-law's. Because forgiveness, there, was no longer a choice. It was an inevitable consequence of the truth. The mother-in-law, in a low voice, broke the silence. "I have always believed that people only get lost when they have nowhere to return. But today I see that sometimes they get lost even when they want to come back. They just don't know how." And he looked at the man. "You were lucky. It was found." He nodded, his eyes teary. "And it was you who found me." The daughter-in-law looked at her mother-in-law with an expression that was difficult to decipher. A mixture of gratitude, shame, and something close to reconnection. "Thank you for not closing the door," she said, in a tone that seemed small but sounded like the beginning of something huge. And at that moment, it was possible to feel the miracle. 3 generations touched by the same invisible thread, that of redemption. But not everything was cured at once. Dad knew that after that Christmas, there would still be difficult days. "I didn't expect to live nearby, be invited to birthdays, or be entitled to a fixed place at the table. But knowing that he had spoken, that he had been heard, was already more than he dreamed." "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he told his daughter. But I deserve the right to repent every day, with dignity." And those words, so raw, were like balm. Because they didn't promise miracles, they didn't demand anything. They just acknowledged the past. And there, between words and gestures, between the weight of absence and the relief of listening, the first foundation of what might one day be called a new beginning was born. Supper was set, but no one was yet rising. It was as if everyone had understood that there was not just a date, but a crossing. The crossing of an injured woman who was reunited with her father, of a broken man who found redemption in a simple gesture, and of a mother-in-law who, after so many years of silence, discovered that her voice did not need to be loud to be heard. The son got up and served wine to everyone. I think it's time for us to toast, not to what has passed, but to what may yet come. And he raised his glass with a humble smile. The mother-in-law smiled back. The man did the same. And the daughter, with her eyes still teary, responded with a shy but sincere toast. In that toast, in that look exchanged between everyone, there were no promises. There was presence. There was truth. And that, in itself, was more than enough. Because, in the end, forgiveness does not begin with perfect words, nor with grandiose gestures. It begins with the simple willingness to listen and to remain. Even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when there is still a long way to go. And that Christmas, in a house that had already given up hope, a different light was turned on. Not on the embellishments, but in the heart of each one. And although the night wasn't over yet, everyone knew, deep down, that something had changed forever. The table still exuded a perfume of freshly kindled hope. There was no more luxury or pretense in that arrangement, but every detail seemed to shine with new meaning. The neatly folded napkin, the simple antique porcelain plate, the candle that melted little by little. Everything was now part of a silent choreography that only the attentive eye could perceive. Her mother-in-law, sitting at the bedside, carried on her shoulders not only a shawl, but the weight of years in which she wished she was right there, without being remembered as a nuisance, but recognized as a root. The son, who had never seen her so calm, seemed to relearn who his mother was that night. And her daughter-in-law, even in silence, looked at her with eyes of someone who finally saw. The daughter-in-law's father remained silent, as if every move needed permission. But his presence was rock solid, not because it imposed authority, but because it held up what no one else could for years, the space of absence. It was as if he was there not only as a father figure, but as a symbol that even what has been broken can, if there is courage, be touched again. When the protagonist poured wine in her own glass, after years without toasting with her family, there was silence. And then the daughter-in-law, with teary eyes, held out her own cup so that they could meet in the air. Here's to it. A bridge. A gesture that said, I still don't know how to love you, but I don't want to push you away anymore. The conversation started timidly. A comment on the background music. A souvenir of an old Christmas. Remember that time? Between half-choked laughter. The mother-in-law laughed slowly. It was a laugh that seemed to have been born from inside a well, muffled, hidden, but when it came to the surface, it spread light. The son observed everything and, perhaps for the first time, understood what his mother always carried without saying. Silent love, the one that serves, welcomes, waits, and never gives up. And in his eyes there was an apology that didn't need to be verbalized. When he lightly touched her on the shoulder, she looked at him as if to say, I always knew you would come back. Dinner became a ritual, not of food, but of reintegration. Each bite felt like a vote of confidence. Every exchange of glances, a pact to keep trying. The protagonist got up, went to the kitchen, and came back with a sweet that her son loved as a child. Rice pudding with cinnamon. I thought you might still like that, she said, placing the plate in front of her. He did not immediately respond, but he ate a spoonful, He closed his eyes. It tastes the same as it did in childhood. She smiled. It was her gift, not wrapped, but give from the heart. The daughter-in-law's father observed everything with an expression of someone who understood. Love is sometimes made of small turns, not big returns. And then, in the middle of dessert, what she least expected happened. The daughter-in-law got up and approached slowly. He touched his mother-in-law's shoulder gently, and she said, "Thank you for coming, and for not leaving myself when I left you." The protagonist felt her throat close. That sentence, more than an apology, was a confession. She stood up, hugged her daughter-in-law gently, and the hug was returned. It wasn't perfect. It was real. It was tender. It was the first hug in years. And at that moment, the whole room was moved. The guests, friends, and relatives around knew that they were facing something rare, the victory of the bond over the ego. The golden star, which remained in the center of the table, reflected the light of the candle as if it were breathing. It was more than an ornament. It was a living metaphor. Everyone there carried their own lost stars, their forgotten brilliance, their painful memories. And now, little by little, that star seemed to multiply inside each one. The daughter-in-law's father touched her reverently. "That was in your box 20 years ago. Today, it's at the center of the table." The daughter nodded with tears in her eyes. "Maybe it's time for us to hang her on the tree." And that's what they did. They got up together. He, she, and her mother-in-law. And together they hung the star on the tree. And in that simple gesture, they sealed the rebirth. The night continued. There was more coffee, more conversations, more laughter, and the lightness that took over the room was something that no gift could buy. When the protagonist stepped out onto the balcony later, with a steaming cup in her hands, she looked up at the starry sky and said to herself, "It wasn't the perfect Christmas, but it was the truest I've ever experienced." Her son came over, hugged her from behind, and said, "I don't think I ever told you that, but I love you, Mom." She held his hand tightly, and for the first time in many years, he answered without hesitation, "And I never stopped loving you." When a story like this ends, the silence that comes after usually speaks louder than any soundtrack. Because it doesn't end in the last dialogue, nor in the final image of the star hanging from the tree. It continues within those who watch. Within those who lived absences, he felt the pain of not being invited, of being misunderstood, of desiring reconciliation, but never finding the right moment. And if you felt that, if at some point you saw your reflection in one of the characters, then this story was made for you too. Because the true spirit of Christmas is not in the lights, the wrappings, or the beautiful phrases written on cards. It is in the forgiveness that we almost gave up offering. It's in the courage to show up, even when you've been told not to come. It is in the strength of reaching out, even when everything inside you asks you to step aside. Perhaps this is precisely where the miracle begins. Not when everything is resolved perfectly, but when someone decides that they will love, despite the hurt. That he will listen, despite the wound. That he will try, even for fear of not being received. This story reminds us that sometimes the greatest gift is not something you buy. It is the time that is given. It is the gesture that is repeated. It is the presence that insists. And even if you haven't experienced something exactly the same, I'm sure that, somewhere in your life, there is a star that was forgotten inside a box. Something you kept waiting for the right moment. A conversation you didn't have, a hug that was left for later, a call you never made. But the right time does not come. It is created, and it can be now. So if this story moved you, if it touched you in any way, if it opened something inside your chest, I invite you to be part of this channel. Here, each video is an invitation to feel more, forgive more, and live with more truth. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us. Because storytelling like this is more than entertainment. It is a call to the soul, and your presence here is part of that.